Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan East.
This is Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Hey everybody, Pete A. Turner from the Break It Down Show, Lions Rock Productions, and we have got a heck of an album fight for you today. This is going to be an interesting one. We got some old timers in the ring. We've got Neil Young taking on John Fogerty. And the albums, well, I guess I'll let Phil take care of the rest of the introductions. Phil?
Today's album fight is a 9-round matchup between the Godfather of Grunge and a Creedence Clearwater Revivalist. In the red corner, we have the personal lyrics and signature tenor singing voice of Neil Young. With a live album from 1979, Rust Never Sleeps. And his opponent in the blue corner. After a 9-year hiatus, we have the songwriting and guitar mastery of John Fogerty. With his third solo studio album from 1985,
Happy to be here.
Center Field. Let's get ready to ramble. Take it away.
Oh, thanks for having me, Pete. It's always a good time.
I love Phil's introductions. They make me laugh, and we are indeed ready to ramble. But before we do, let's get Richard's pre-fight on this interesting fight. Richard.
This week's fight feels a whole lot like one we had a few weeks ago. On paper, one of the albums showed to be a clear winner. Neil Young took 8 of the 13 categories, whereas John Fogerty only 3, with only 2 ties in the factors we looked at. But like that previous fight, one of the 3 actual Song v Song categories was different enough to make me take pause. While Young won 2 of those Song v Song categories, the third was essentially a tie. Now, they did receive more winning rounds than Fogerty, but it was only by a small margin, and there were far more tied rounds than winning rounds, meaning that in that set of factors at least, it's another potential split decision or, God forbid, another tie. In all the factors we put through the patent pending numbers process, Young didn't win by much, making me think while it's his fight to lose, that we'll have another potential squeaker this week. Rust Never Sleeps, 5 rounds to 4, probably with a split vote. It could even go the other way, but I'm going to say Rust Never Sleeps. Back to you guys.
So Richard predicting no tie this week, and that'll be, well, I guess we'll have to see what happens. Our judges today, this fight, of course, was built by Scott Burford. So, Scott, it's been a little while since you've been in the ring. Welcome back.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And then we also have returning Tony Alvarado, who's become a bit of a repeat judge now. So thank you for being so steady and reliable.
Oh, thanks for having me, Pete. It's always a good time.
And ever ready to jump into the ring with the tuxedo T-shirt on is Mike Lipari. Michael, how are you?
Hello and good morning.
Gentlemen, thoughts pre-fight. Mike, go first.
I have to admit that neither one of these albums has been on regular rotation for me. In fact, as I was listening to them for the first time, I don't recollect ever having listened to either of these albums all the way through once. So this was one of those cool fights for me where a lot of this music was new to me for the first time. And I'm really excited about actually going into this fight a little bit handicapped, I guess you could say.
All right. And Tony, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm same as Mike. These aren't in regular rotation on my listening queue, but I've heard the hits from the Center Field album on the radio, and of John Fogerty. He's got that legendary voice, and then I know casually of Neil Young. I have about 4 or 5 songs of his that I like, but this was really a really good one for me as well, in that I was able to jump into these 2 albums all together pretty much for the first time and see how they measure up.
And Scott, you put this fight together. I'm curious what drew you to it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me say that I'm really excited that neither Mike nor Tony has really listened to either album before, because one of the things I love about album fights is that you can get in the ring with other judges that really don't have, you don't want to get into the ring where all three judges have the same likes and dislikes, right? Because it makes for a boring album fight. So number one, I'm excited about that. Yeah, I put this fight together, and well, I've just from a purely self-serving standpoint, I've loved the music of both these artists for a long time, dating back to when I was about 15 years old. I actually saw them both in concert 2 weeks apart in the mid-'80s, which was pretty cool. Both very enjoyable concerts. But why did I put these two guys together? Well, they haven't been in album fights before. They have a lot of stylistic similarities when you really start to dive deep into their songs. They both use a lot of symbolism to kind of take the listener away to places that maybe you haven't seen or been before. Interestingly, both were sued by their record labels. And that could be a separate discussion in and of itself, but they're both fascinating lawsuits, both around the same time in the mid-'80s. And I think if you're going to tell a story about a period of rock and roll in the 60s and 70s, you can't tell that story adequately without talking about these two guys. So for all those reasons, I thought it would be an interesting album fight. Not necessarily because these are two of their best albums or not, but because they're interesting albums and each in their own way pretty important.
That sounds like a great reason to do it, and I'm super excited to be hosting this. I guess, fellas, we should just go ahead and just get started. So let's go ahead and go. Round one, My, Hey, Hey, Out of the Blue versus The Old Man Down the Road. And I'm going to have Scott start us off.
All right. So, My, Hey, Hey. Well, first of all, everybody who knows this album, it became a bookend with the last song on the album as well, which became a recurring theme for Neil Young. Maybe one of the most interesting things about this tune, it contains the line, "It's better to burn out than fade away." And Kurt Cobain ended his suicide note with that line. So it's pretty haunting and spooky, and Neil Young was pretty messed up when he found out about that. But this song came out at a time when punk was, it had a hold on things in 1979, and a lot of aging rockers were, their future might have been in question. Where was rock music going in 1979? Well, Neil is arguing that it's better to burn out than fade away. When you think about it in hindsight, it was a pretty interesting song because it sort of talked about the status of rock and roll and questioned where it would be going. I've always loved this song just from a personal standpoint, but The Old Man Down the Road, interesting song as well. John Fogerty, in his history, he hadn't recorded an album in almost 9 years when this album came out. Now here's a guy who wrote enough tunes in 1969, 50 years ago, that they outsold the Beatles in that 1 year in 1969. They released 3 of their epic albums as Creedence Clearwater Revival. Pretty amazing output of material. But then he disappeared after Creedence broke up. Nobody had seen him or heard from him really. He had an album rejected by his album label. He was in lawsuits. And finally he shows up with The Old Man Down the Road. I think if you like the music of Creedence, you would like The Old Man Down the Road. As a matter of fact, he was sued for sounding too much like himself as a result of this song. But just getting to the two songs, I'm going to cut to the chase and say that My, Hey, Hey is a more important song in terms of the legacy of both artists. So I give it 10-9 to My, Hey, Hey.
So the legacy wins out. Mike, how did you have this one?
My, Hey, Hey. There's so many great bits of lyrics in there. He's talking about the king is gone, talks about Johnny Rotten. And there's a lot of great lyrics in there besides better to burn out than fade away, which was also quoted by the bad guy in Highlander. I must add that in. Overall, this song is definitely one of the ones that was already on my playlist and rotation in Spotify before this album fight. So I was familiar with the song, and I've always loved it. Now, flipping over to Fogerty, Old Man Down the Road is a classic sounding CCR song from John Fogerty. But the problem with this and the basis for that lawsuit that Scott was talking about is that it is a little bit derivative. He won the lawsuit that it wasn't infringing on his own song, which the copyright belonged to somebody else at that point. But the song is a little bit derivative of Run Through the Jungle by Creedence Clearwater Revival. And in a really, really close match of two excellent songs, I ended up giving it to Neil Young. I think mostly when I had to find a nit to pick, it was because Old Man, while still a great song, sounded a little bit too much like another song. So I gave it to Neil Young 10-9.
10-9. All right. Tony, how did you have it?
So this first round was right out of the box was a tough one for me. I really liked how Old Man Down the Road, that's a really great song to open up the album. It's almost like, Scott said that it'd been about 9 years since he released an album, and it's almost like here I am, and here's my song, and it sounds really familiar to everybody. And Scott has said, and like Mike said, it's classic, sounds just like a CCR song. I thought I sensed a bit of a little Run to the Jungle in the melody, but it had a good riff, had a catchy tune, and I kind of liked it. My Hey Hey is, for everything that Mike just said, it's almost like a +1. It's such a good song, and that's one song. There's like 4 or 5 Neil Young songs that I really, really liked before I went into this fight, and this was one of them. I like the allusion to Johnny Rotten, the better to burn out than to fade away. That's great. I love the harmonica in the middle of the song. I gave it to Neil Young 10-9.
All right. Well, let's move on into round 2, Thrasher versus Rock and Roll Girls. And we'll have Mike start us off.
Neil Young Thrasher. It's a pleasant enough acoustic song. I really like the guitar intro. I did like the lyrics throughout. The one that stuck with me was burning my credit cards for fuel. And Neil always has these introspective lyrics, and for most of his songs. It is a bit long, to quote myself. It could have used a little bit of a haircut, I think. But otherwise, certainly a solid second track. Then you go to Rock and Roll Girls. I think this might be my favorite track on the Fogerty album. I don't know if it was a huge hit. I do remember hearing it on the radio. But it appeals to me not just, because it got played a bit more, but it's got classic Fogerty vocals throughout. The guitar is just pretty amazing throughout. There's a really nice sax solo in the middle of it. And this song sounds a lot like Creedence Clearwater Revival without sounding too much like an individual song from CCR. For this one, I gave it to Fogerty with a bit of a gap, actually, 10-9.
A little bit of a gap. All right. Tony, how about you?
Yeah, so Rock and Roll Girls, I enjoyed the simplicity of this song, and I think one of the things you're going to see, one of the things with the last song as well, is I really liked how simple the Fogerty songs were. The lyrics are good, the melodies are simple, but for the most part catchy. I also like the sax solo in the middle. Fogerty's voice on this song just really comes out, and I like that quick little falsetto he goes to at the end of each line, the little one syllable falsetto. That's really cool. I really like that. For Thrasher, that was the first time I ever heard the song, and when I was listening to it, I had the headphones on. I'm just listening, and right away I got the feeling that this song was more than what it appeared to be, and in doing some research, it looked like it was about Neil Young's time with Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, and I could totally hear it in the lyrics. So I got bored and left them there. They were just dead weight to me, better down the road than without that load. It's like he has something to prove, and he's like, these guys aren't doing it for me anymore. I got to go my own way, and I really appreciated that. I felt that those lyrics really spoke to me, because I've been in places where, you just need to move on from people, and I felt that was what what Neil Young was doing as well. I gave this one to Neil Young 10-9. Just the metaphors in the song were really powerful for me.
Neil Young's metaphors paying off. Scott?
This may have been the toughest round for me. I mean, they're both, I really like both songs, but for totally different reasons. And a lot of my analysis is similar to what Tony just said, in the sense that Rock and Roll is sort of a light song. It's really John Fogerty writing pop songs, not too complicated, similar to what he did in Creedence, but with an updated sound. It's always been a really enjoyable song for me. Thrasher, historically, and since I've owned this album for over 35 years, I've listened to it hundreds of times, I never really cared for it that much, but like Tony pointed out, when you dig into the lyrics and you really read about what the song's about, it's really an amazing song from that standpoint. So for me, it's tough. I guess one of the reasons I listen to music is because of how it makes me feel personally, not necessarily what the song itself means, but how it translates to what it means to me in my life. And, the first song, or the first lyric on Rock and Roll Girls goes, "Life is like a rodeo. The trick is to ride and make it to the bell." So to me, that lyric has always meant a lot. It certainly means a lot to Fogerty, because when the time this album was made, he had gone through over 10 years of legal battles with Fantasy Records post Creedence. So for him, it was like a rodeo. But all of us in our own lives, we probably have similar situations where we just have to hang on and try to survive something. So that, for me, was probably the ultimate tiebreaker. So I'm giving it 10-9 to Rock and Roll Girls.
Rock and Roll Girls. All right. So pretty even fight here through the first two. Let's go ahead and jump into round 3. Ride My Llama versus Big Train from Memphis. Tony?
Okay, so with Big Train, once again, we have a very simple song, I thought. Another song that could have been a CCR song. Song feels good, riff is happy. I like how the narrator is looking back on his life, and I like how it seems to pack a lot in, a 3-minute package. I thought it was a good track. Ride My Llama is even shorter than Big Train. I think it's only like 2.5 minutes, but what I noticed in this song was how the acoustic, Neil Young playing acoustic songs just really fits him here. And I just loved it. I loved it. I loved the lyric where he said, "I met a man from Mars and he picked up all my guitars," because right then I thought of the Blondie song, since I'm more of an alternative guy than anything else. I really enjoyed the lyric. Most of the time in past album fights, I've liked the simpler track, but for some reason Neil Young got me sucked in, and now I'm looking at his metaphors and his lyrics. I'm like, wow, these are really good. I gave this one to Neil Young, also 10-9.
All right. Scott?
Big Train from Memphis, to me, was another return to the kind of songwriting that Fogerty was so well known for in Creedence, and maybe the fact that it sequenced the first 3 songs on the album we're looking at, Old Man Down the Road, Rock and Roll Girls, and now Big Train. They all are there to please fans of Creedence Clearwater Revival without trying to necessarily be a remake of Creedence. Big Train, it just follows a common Fogerty theme, which is writing about spots that he wasn't from, right? Young boy from El Cerrito, California, right here in the Bay Area where a lot of us live. And he's writing about Memphis. Well, he was written about Memphis. He's written about the South. A lot of people were probably fooled for years into thinking that Creedence was probably from Louisiana or Memphis. But no, they were from Northern California. Who knew? It was a rude awakening for me when I found that out. At any rate, I've always loved Big Train from Memphis. The one nit I would pick with it, though, is that the situation here in center field, Fogerty's playing all the instruments. So a lot of the arrangements are too spare and simplistic when you go back and listen to the album 30 years later. I love the song. The nit I would pick with Big Train is that it could have worked a lot better in a larger band setting. Ride My Llama, of course, he pronounces it Ride My Llama, so he can rhyme it with the word Texarkana. I've never really connected with this song, although I will agree with Tony's sentiments about the songwriting and the fact that it is really vintage Neil Young acoustic. It was a tough decision, but I gave it to Big Train from Memphis, 10-9.
All right. Yeah, it's interesting you talk about, John Fogerty writing about places he's not really been. Do you think he actually spent time on Poudre Creek? Or is that also made up, do you think?
It's a good question. You could probably write a lot of nice songs about Poudre Creek, or at least parts of it.
It just seems like something like him, like he might see that sign driving to Sacramento or whatever, and then like, I'm going to put Poudre Creek in a song.
Poudre Creek. Maybe we'll see the Poudre Creek sessions pop up in a few years, Pete.
Oh,
you never know.
Yeah, there I am in Rio Vista. All right, well, Michael.
Ride My Llama, I listened to the song the first time through without listening to the lyrics, and it's just a really beautifully played acoustic song. I really like the guitar throughout this one. It's relatively short. I think it might be the shortest track on either album. When I listened to it again, I really couldn't figure out what it was about. The lyrics about Mars and guitars and riding the llama. I just, sometimes you don't get the song, but you still like the song. This was one of those cases where, 2-3 listenings, I still don't know what he was singing about, but I really like it. And it was really I was really starting to see a lot of this Neil Young acoustic side was just so beautifully played throughout, just really appealing. Big Train to Memphis is also one of the shorter songs. And I really did like this one too. It kind of reminded me of that early 50s, 60s Memphis sound, Elvis Presley. But it was a great country rock mesh, very well performed. It was a really close round, so I had to resort to nitpicking. And I think Fogerty's vocals early on the track were just a little bit weak, I think. It built really well, but the first couple of lines, I think probably should have been another take. So really, really picking nits on this one. I was having trouble with this round. This is, I think, the last one that I officially scored, but I gave it to Neil Young barely, 10-9.
All righty. Picking nits to get there. I like that. You know that. Let's go ahead and go round 4, Pocahontas, which is a song that I love, versus I Saw It on TV. Scott?
Well, Pete, I love Pocahontas too. It's just the arrangement on this song is really, really beautiful. And that struck me from probably the very first time I heard it. I've always just listened to this song and felt relaxed, just enjoying it. It's got a recurring theme for Neil Young, writing about European colonization and how it impacted the Indian tribes in America. And he's done that before, and this song is actually pretty old. It appeared on this album in 1979, but he wrote it about 7 years prior. One of the things he did was he would play songs in concert to find out how the fans responded to them, and then eventually, sometimes not, they would end up in albums. So he had a sort of a strange way of bringing songs out, holding them back, and then finally releasing them. This is an actual studio recorded version of Pocahontas, and it's just a beautiful song. I Saw It on TV. Again, the arrangements, the electronic drumming didn't do a whole lot for me. Fogerty's a baby boomer. He's the same age as my parents, roughly. And I remember my parents talking about when they were teenagers getting their first television in the mid-50s. And so he's telling us stories about things that happened. It's kind of a review of history, but that also gives it kind of a dated feeling. It's just a dull song. There's not a lot that's memorable when you listen to it. There are no big hooks. I don't find myself whistling it as I'm driving down the road, but I do find myself whistling maybe Pocahontas, right? So Pocahontas 10, I Saw It on TV 9.
Mike.
Yeah, it just keeps coming with these great acoustic songs. This one has much, much deeper lyrics than I think anything we've heard from Neil so far, and that's including Hey Hey My My. There's a lot to hear in this song when you actually read and listen to the lyrics. And yeah, it's an often told tale these days, but I don't think it was as popular an opinion back in the late 60s, early 70s of just how horrible the Native Americans were treated during the European colonization. So this is some really deep stuff from Neil, but it's still just a beautiful song. And as I was going through this in my mind before I listened the first time, the one thing I thought of was, Neil Young has that high-pitched, nasally voice he's famous for. And I was worried that I was going to be starting to get vocal fatigue from Neil. And what I found, and in my notes I'm reading this, I'm finding that I like his voice more and more as I binge listen. And what I ended up doing after the album fight was I listened to a bunch more Neil Young songs. I pulled up Heart of Gold. I pulled up Keep Rockin' in the Free World. I just grabbed some of his other catalog songs and really ended up binge listening Neil Young after the album fight. Moving over to Fogerty, I said here a bit more political, I suppose, but it's not really stingingly political. It's just presenting some history. To your point, it was a lot of TV history. So covering that period of time. But to me, it really felt like an early Southern rock version of We Didn't Start the Fire by Billy Joel, and I don't like that song much either. So this was an easy round for me. Neil Young takes it 10-9.
All right, 10-9. How about you, Tony?
So, yeah, with the Fogerty song, I felt that he's trying to give me a history lesson, and that has you have to be careful when you do those in songs. Like, it just reminded me of an early version of We Didn't Start the Fire, and just not at the same pace. And he mentions a bunch of important things from his past, and it's really cool because it's really cool to reflect on your past, and we always talk about how songs that evoke memories of the past, and so he's putting those memories down and putting them in a song for us. I thought it was a decent melody. Again, very simple. Thought I caught a few chords of "Have You Ever Seen the Rain" at the end of the song, so I thought it was okay. Pocahontas. Now, this was the first time I've ever listened to this album, except for the bookends. I've heard those before, and Pocahontas is now one of my new favorite songs. I thought this song was darn near perfect. I love the visions that he evokes in the song with the icy sky at night. And we basically go on a time traveling journey with him, because we go from talking about Pocahontas and Homeland We Never Seen, and then at the end we're with Marlon Brando at the Astrodome. I mean, it's like where is Neil taking us? But wherever he's taking us, I'm totally in. And like Mike said, I found when I was listening to this album, at the same time, I'm sitting there on my computer and just pulling up more Neil Young songs, because I'm like, this is great. How have I not noticed this before? Before I know it, I have 200 Neil Young songs I'm going to listen to. So yeah, this song is great. It's very powerful. 10-9, easy, Neil Young.
Yeah, I love the Johnny Cash version of Pocahontas. I just think it's great. It's a nod to Neil Young to write a song that's good enough that they both can approach it and deliver something really incredible. So it's boy, I just love that fight. I love this song, and let's just keep going. Let's go ahead and go round 5. Sail Away versus Mr. Greed. Mike?
More harmonica, very, very nice. Neil Young is not only is a great lyricist, not only a great vocalist and a great guitar player, but he can play the hell out of his harmonica too. Great harmonies with Nicolette Larson, who was kind of Neil Young's prodigy, I guess, as I was reading the history. I think she had one big hit, and I just really enjoyed the acoustic side of Neil Young's album. Next round is when the electric starts, and let's see if he can keep the momentum. But it's just been five tremendous songs in a row. Over to Fogerty. Mr. Greed is the first of the angry songs from Mr. Fogerty. I think there's a couple, maybe a few on here, all about all the crap he was going through with all the legal issues he had with his former label. And I feel bad for the guy. It doesn't make this song a whole lot better just because he's angry. The guitar sounds angry, the vocals sound angry, and then the drums sound programmed. I wanted to enjoy this song. I really wanted to enjoy this song. And on the second listen for both songs, I just like Sail Away more. To nitpick again, which I always have to do in close rounds, the repeated Mr. Greed chorus at the end of Fogerty's song really sounded synthesized to me. And it just felt weird having electronic synthesizers and electronic drums on a John Fogerty song. So I gave this Neil Young 10-9.
Tony, go ahead.
So as far as Mr. Greed goes, I thought it was a quote classic Fogerty song in that it sounds like he's, it's the distinct Fogerty sound, the distinct guitar. I too was not a fan of the electronics in the songs, and it seemed like he was kind of doing the listeners a disservice here. We have what we're used to, and maybe it's on the listener in this case. We're used to what CCR sounds like, and we want to hear more like that. And with the electronic drums, I just wasn't having any real part of it. And the song itself, it just sounded like he wasn't, like Mike said, he wasn't happy. I said he wasn't happy with 80s excess, which is kind of weird. But Sail Away, I thought was almost as good as Pocahontas. And, once again, Neil Young comes through on the acoustic side. I like the lyric where he said, see the losers in the best bars, see the winners in the dives, because I'm a dive bar guy. And I'm like, yeah, I'm a winner. So the Nicolette Larson's vocals were great. It's just another winner, 10-9 Neil Young.
I will say this, Tony, to highlight the point that you're a winner. You and I and Mike have all been in my little neighborhood area. You and I have been to a dive bar. Mike and I have not yet. Yes. So, Lipari, why don't we get over to the Tustin Inn? Come on. What's holding you back?
This episode of the Break It Down Show is brought to you by Lions Rock Productions.
That's us.
We publish, evaluate, and develop podcasts just like this one, consult others to build their own, and create associated content and content marketing strategies.
So if you're launching or expanding your social media presence, your business, or your personal brand, or if you just want to take your media presence to the next level,
reach out to us on Twitter
at Pete A. Turner
or at JohnLG69
at the Break It Down Show.
There's 1,000 ways to get a hold of us.
Now enjoy the show.
Lipari, why don't we get over to the Tustin Inn? Come on. What's holding you back?
I have been to plenty of dive bars, just not with you, Pete.
Well, there you go. Let's fix that. Scott, you ready to go to a dive bar?
I've been to many, and I would love to go to many more. And Tony, you hit on my favorite line in this song, which is actually a line I repeat to people constantly. It's my favorite Neil Young lyric. See the losers in the best bars, meet the winners in the dives. I mean, it's just true. Let's just face that. It's true. So Sail Away is just a beautiful song. The instrumentation it's just vintage acoustic Neil Young. And if you love Neil Young like I do, you probably love Sail Away. I love the duet with Nicolette Larson. She's got a beautiful voice that obviously complements his. And let's talk about a couple of things about Fogerty. Number one, this man holds a grudge. He doesn't forget any slight, however large or small. I would never want to get on this man's bad side. I don't think any of us would. But I think what is a little disturbing to most listeners who have this or have listened to this album is the electronics. And it sounds very dated now. I was confused. I bought this album when it first came out, and I was excited because I'd been waiting for his new music for a long time, but I was disappointed when I heard the electronic drums and the synthesizers, and it took some really strong songs and weakened them, in my opinion. So you have that coupled with the anger that he was taking out against his former label, or specifically a guy named Saul Zanz, who was Mr. Greed. And I don't think I can get over the anger. I love the guitar hooks on this song. It's rocking, and I think he needs more of that. But he takes one step forward and one step back at the same time. That said, certainly not enough to overcome a beautiful song like Sail Away. So for me, it's 10-9 for Sail Away.
Fellas, we're just past halfway in this fight. 9 rounds. We're at round 5. And what I'm realizing, the fight started out pretty close, but the last 3 rounds, Neil Young has just laid an absolute whooping down. Only one of the judges has given any of the last 3 rounds or any point at all in the last 3 rounds to John Fogerty. So Neil Young is dominating at this point. Scott, what does John Fogerty need to do, or what is he missing as he's looking across the ring at Neil Young?
Well, the thing that he's missing is that this album, he wrote, produced, arranged, and played all of the instruments on this album. So is John Fogerty a great drummer? No. Can he play awesome saxophone? Well, he ain't Clarence Clemens. He does an admirable job for somebody who can play all these different instruments. But really what this sounds like is a nicely produced album of demos. And that's essentially what it was. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up, because when John and I interviewed J.R. Robinson last time, he was the MD on this tour for John Fogerty. So he played drums on center field and all of that stuff. And he said they weren't, because of the legal problems, they weren't allowed to play any Creedence songs. And he's like, it was the weirdest tour to go out and work with. So even when John goes on the road, he hires the best guy, but doesn't ask a lot of him because he was in such a fight with the other guys from Creedence. And God's honest truth, I can't name another guy from Creedence, and this could be a Creedence album. So I understand why there was a fight. Those guys legitimately want to get paid. And John's like, I'm the guy doing all the work here. So it's a weird thing. Tony, what's John missing that we're not accounting for here with this fight?
Yeah, that's tough. I think John Fogerty's album is a decent album, but I think so far through 5 rounds, he's just come up against a buzzsaw in Neil Young, and Young just keeps on just hitting him, and even with the acoustic sound, he just keeps hitting at him, and Fogerty can't keep up. I don't necessarily think it's other than in the last song with the electronics, I thought that was a step back. But I don't think it's necessarily anything that Fogerty is doing incorrectly, but more so what Neil Young and Crazy Horse are doing perfectly. That's causing this to be a dominating fight so far.
Mike, your thoughts on the dominance of Neil Young?
I would say if we turn this into a boxing analogy, which it's an album fight, so we damn well should, I would say that Neil Young and Crazy Horse came in with a better fight plan. So you've got two fantastic boxers. John Fogerty is just being outboxed by Neil Young. Every time Fogerty comes with something good, Neil comes with something slightly better. There have been a couple rounds for me which were easy rounds, and 3 rounds that were tough, and I had to pick nits to come up with the winner. But the winner always seems to be Neil Young when you dig to that next layer and either have to look for flaws in one or something that was just outstanding and above expectations for the
Well, let's see what's outstanding in round 6. Round 6, Powderfinger versus Searchlight. Tony?
Searchlight, I thought, had a classic 80s sound mixed with the classic Fogerty sound. And when I first heard this song, I know it came out a few years before. I think the album came out in 85, I believe. But when I first heard Searchlight, I thought that this was perfect for the film Roadhouse. I don't know why, I just thought it was a song that would be in Roadhouse. I was not a fan of the electronic drums again, or the horns. I thought these took away from the song. Not one of my favorites on Center Field album. I thought it was just okay. I thought it wasn't great or not bad. It was just kind of in the middle there. It didn't really do a whole lot to move the needle for me. Powderfinger comes on, and it's the first song on the electric side of the album. And when I heard the first electric chords, I thought, what is this? Because I thought it was all going to be acoustic. I mean, he's laying acoustic tracks down. Oh, this is going to be nine track acoustic album. And boy, was I in for a rude awakening there. It was a great song. The story is heartbreaking. I liked at the end. I liked how he said, I raised my rifle to my eye, never stopped to wonder why. Then I saw black and my face splashed in the sky. I was like, whoa, this is heavy. So it was a very powerful song for me. I really enjoyed it very much. After the shock of finding out that this was going to be an electric song, I was like, yeah, all right, this sounds good. So I gave this one, again, Neil Young, 10-9.
Oh, Neil Young continuing to feed the leather. Scott?
Sweeping.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, and feed it they do on starting off on this side. So thinking back to the days when a record was side A and side B and not 9 songs, splashed together on a CD. Tony, the thing about an acoustic and electric side was just genius, really. And Neil Young had been doing this in concerts for many years, where basically from the time he started recording with Crazy Horse, he would do an acoustic set, then Crazy Horse would come out and they would rock. So the arrangements of the songs on this album kind of are derivative of the last 10 years for him. And so he certainly did this on purpose. And Powderfinger, full disclosure, is my favorite Neil Young song. I love the story that you alluded to, Tony, about Powderfinger. But what I really love about it is how during the story, in the lyrics, the way that the band plays, it's just intense. And it brings out, I think, the best of Crazy Horse. So I'm going to speak as For the Neil Young and Crazy Horse fans out there, we love this song, and when he plays it live, people go crazy. So Powder Finger is an easy winner. I'm not going to say too much about Searchlight because I was just disappointed when I heard this song. The electronics, the horns, the drumming just really, really turned me off. As much as I wanted it to be sound like an old-time Creedence song, like a Graveyard Train or something like that, it just doesn't come anywhere close. When it's going up against a song which is it's one of Neil Young and Crazy Horse's finest songs, this to me is a 10-8 knockout.
Oh.
Knockout, baby.
John Fogerty takes a knee.
Mm-hmm.
The judge is coming over, rubbing his gloves on his shirt. You all right? You with it, John? All right. That's fantastic. Mike?
Powderfinger, First Electric. I'm going to echo the other guys about remembering when albums had two sides. And this is definitely a departure from the last 5 songs, but not in a bad way. I really dug the music. The vocals seem to be a bit more strained to me. The band, though, is tight and well rehearsed. You can tell these guys are used to working together. And this is, if I'm not mistaken, live. Most of side B, which I think might be a new thing for us, an album fight. I don't know if we've done a live album. I know we've had a few live tracks peppered throughout, but this was kind of new and different. You have to listen to live tracks a little bit differently than studio tracks, but Powderfinger was just a damn good song. Searchlight, cue the electric drums and fake horns again, and just a repetitive chorus. This really sounds like the 80s, and not in a good way. Listening to this song, I really did like the guitar solo. Honestly, the guitar solo saved this from being a knockdown for me. I went 10-9 Neil Young.
You're right, Mike. That is a really good guitar solo.
The guy definitely is. John Fogerty can play the hell out of the guitar. I've been throwing compliments to Neil, and I don't think I've thrown enough to John Fogerty. He has such a great and unique voice, and he can really play the hell out of the guitar. It comes through on his album, especially in tracks like this. I just think that there's too much weakness to this track outside of his big talents to give it a win.
This is Mike's version of coming into the ring to tell the kid, "Hey, kid, just stay on your feet. Get through the fight because it's, it ain't going too good." And he's rubbing his back like, "Dig deep. Show us what you got."
I said, "Come on, Rock. This guy's murdering ya."
You got to stay up, champ. All right. Well, listen, let's go ahead and do the Burford round since Scott's here. This is your round. Of course, you always notice that the 7th round seems to sag in a fight. We'll see how that goes, and we'll see if some of Mike's back rubbing helps out for John Fogerty. So we have round 7, Welfare Mothers versus Center Field. Scott?
All right, show of hands. Do welfare mothers make better lovers?
I hope so.
Okay, I'll take down your votes. Okay. That's 4 yes. All right, duly noted. Welfare mothers make better lovers. This is a funny song, really, right? I mean, they're joking, but they're jamming and playing. And what Mike said about this being a live recording, basically the Crazy Horse tracks on this half of the album were all recorded live, but they did overdub in the studio, and they created some empty spaces between the tracks and tried to eliminate the crowd noise to make you think it was a studio recording. But you can feel the energy in these songs. But the problem with Welfare Mothers, other than it being silly, is that it's probably going up against the greatest song John Fogerty has written outside of Creedence Clearwater Revival. At least that's my opinion. Center Field is just an amazing song. Now, we can chide him for the electronic drumming and the hand clapping in Center Field, which sounds a little campy. But I got to give the guy props. It is only the second song recognized and inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame, along with Take Me Out to the Ball Game. So you've got that song, and you've got this song. This song has probably been played millions and millions of times at baseball games. And it's just become a legendary track. I think most people may not know that it's John Fogerty singing the song, but they recognize the song. I think it's a truly great song. And as much as I enjoy Crazy Horse jamming away, and I could listen to that constantly. Welfare Mothers is just a silly song. So we're doing a knockdown in reverse with center field knocking down Welfare Mothers.
Yes.
Fogerty's fighting back. He's angry. We know he's an angry man, right?
Yes, of course.
He's angry, pissed off. He's here in track 7 and going, "You motherfuckers, get you back." So that's, in my opinion, how it goes
This
down.
is a Hall of Fame moment here. The Lipari rub creates the Goldbergian reverse. And the
Good job with the rub, Mike. It worked.
Or was his name Goldberg?
Goldberg,
What was Mick's last name?
Yeah.
Mick Goldberg, the Goldbergian reverse, pulled off by Mike Lipari. That's fantastic, Mike. Why don't you go ahead and give us your round 7
I love
analysis.
the lyrics. Welfare mothers make better lovers. And Scott steals my thunder, so I'm just going to skip all my crappy jokes from my notes.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you.
Well, that's okay. I'll find another way to get a corny joke in before the end of the fight. I got at least a 10 or better in me still. I hear the Godfather of Grunge influence here. I think he wrongly got this nickname Godfather of Grunge because of Kurt Cobain quoting "Hey Hey" in the Suicide Note. But I think that you listen to Neil Young in this era, he's really kind of ahead of his time. It's 1979, and he's evoking early 90s guitar work. Pretty amazing stuff. And then it just jumps into a blender. That's what happens. So you're going up against John Fogerty Center Field. As a baseball fan, this ode to baseball already has an unfair advantage over any other song you can get into the ring with. I love all the baseball references throughout. And it's just a flat-out fun song. I can deal with the electronic drums and the hand claps. They just seem to fit into the kind of happy, uplifting mood of this song. So, Young gives a really good fight, and is a little bit wobbly at the end of this round, probably holding on to the rope when the bell rings. But I didn't give it a knockdown. I just gave it an easy 10-9 to John Fogerty.
Wow. All right. So not quite the knockdown that Scott saw, but Tony, what did you see?
Well, I saw very similarly. The Fogerty song Center Field. Anybody who's been to a baseball game has probably heard that song. We're all, put me in coach is like the catch line for all of us who ride the bench anyway. And we're recording this in mid-March. Spring training's going on, and this song just kind of gets you excited about a new beginning. And I really liked that. I liked all the baseball references. And yeah, I agree with Mike. We ripped Fogerty in previous songs for the electronics, but here it works. And so I appreciate that it works here. Welfare Mothers, it has great riffs. I thought it was a fun song. And when I first listened to it, I was thinking, this could be a David Bowie song. This could be a Pearl Jam song. It could cover a whole lot of the music spectrum here. I like the repetitive verse, and it's certainly catchy. I don't think Neil Young does anything poorly here. It's going up against a legendary song. So 10-9 to Fogerty.
10-9 to Fogerty. So a commanding round. Maybe Fogerty's turned it around. Let's see how round 8 goes. Sedan Delivery versus I Can't Help Myself. Mike?
He didn't turn it around.
No.
Sedan Delivery is damn near a punk song. You got your distortion, you got the punk tempo, you've got some subversive lyrics, you've got some angry vocals. I'm always picky about songs with tempo changes because I think it's an overused tripe that some artists try to art up their songs with, and it's not always successful. But I think in this case it works great to switch up the tempo throughout the song the way he does to kind of add some punch to the chorus. It's a bit longish, but not, this is not a song that needs a haircut. Again, as I'm doing my notes, if I have to pick nits later, I always throw in these little bits like song ran a bit on the long side. Over to Fogerty, more electronic drums. Ugh. Just those are wearing on me. It's a strong vocal performance. It's distinctly Fogerty, but the electronic drums and the hand claps don't work in this song. They're just killing me, and they're killing Fogerty too. This is an easy 10-9 for Neil Young.
10-9. All right. Well, not pretty for John Fogerty. Tony?
Yeah, for I Can't Help Myself, I wrote down that Fogerty follows up his album's best song with one of his worst songs. And that was disappointing. I thought he had some momentum going. The electronics take away from the song in this one, on this track again. And I started thinking, yeah, it worked on Center Field, but I was wondering why he even used it all. Why he even used the electronics at all? I thought it really did more bad than good in this case. Sedan Delivery was very interesting. I loved the tempo changes from verse to verse. I thought the lyrics were very good. I also wrote that it had a punk vibe, and me being an alternative listener, I really enjoyed that about this song. And I did like how it just jam, 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 and then it screeches to a crawl, and then jam, 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 and then goes to a crawl again. I really like that. 10-9 Neil Young again.
Scott.
Love what you said there, Tony and Mike. Yeah, love Sedan Delivery, and the first guitar chord intro does make you think about punk rock. It makes me think about Johnny Rotten. And then with the kind of obtuse story that they're telling here and the lyrics, it's kind of a Neil and Crazy Horse type of tune. They don't try to make it too crystal clear what they're singing about, but they deliver it with a real punch in this case. Super song. And I have to agree with you guys completely. I Can't Help Myself was really a happy, optimistic tune. It follows Center Field, which is basically him saying that I want to get back in the game. I'm back. I'm ready to go. And he follows it with I Can't Help Myself, which is really it has the same theme. I'm so happy I can't help myself. But at the same time, it's a much weaker song than Center Field. It seems on side 2, he's trying to make us think that he feels really good. We'll see if that lasts. I don't feel good when I listen to I Can't Help Myself. There are just no hooks here, and the electronic drum portion in the center of the song it's brutal. It's hard on the ears. Maybe in 1984, 85, when he recorded this, it sounded like the right thing to do, but obviously in hindsight, it did not age. It was a bad concept. So I could have gone knockdown here. I decided to give Fogerty one last chance at survival. So it's 10-9 for Neil Young, Crazy Horse, and Sedan Delivery.
Fantastic. Neil Young is like, what do I got to do? What do I got to do? Well, you got to come out for round 9, the final round, take on Hey, Hey, My, Into the Black, taking us back to the beginning, versus Zans Can't Dance. We'll see how that goes for John Fogerty. At least he's getting up when he's off the chair. Fighters are going to touch gloves and come out. Tony, what happens?
So Fogerty might as well have just stayed in the corner. I thought this song was a throw-in, a huge filler. It sounds nothing like any other song on the album. The formula that Fogerty used on this album with his sound and the guitars was decent for 8 songs, and then this song was just, I thought it was just a tire fire. I thought it was the worst song on the album. Hey, Hey, My, Into the Black. Neil Young takes one song and turns it into 2 songs, and it works. There were a few subtle lyric changes that I really, really liked, especially when he asked the question about Johnny Rotten in this song. I thought that was pretty cool. And it's a great closer. This was a knockdown, 10-8, Neil Young.
You're just done with it. Scott, are you done with it?
Pretty much.
Yeah, John Fogerty and electronica just don't go. They just don't go. So, wow, what can I say about Zans Can't Dance? So, number one, about a year after it was released, he had to change the name to Vans Can't Dance, because it was not subtle at all, right? The owner of Fantasy Records was a guy named Saul Zans, and he's the guy that Fogerty was in litigation with for about 13 years after Creedence broke up. So obviously Fogerty is really harboring a lot of anger and hatred towards this guy. We heard about it in Mr. Greed, but he just goes off the edge of the earth here with calling him out by name. It should have been obvious when this record was being prepared that you just can't do that. He's just asking to be sued. And that's in fact what happened. So Fogerty ended up paying and settling for a lot of money, an undisclosed amount, but we figure it was a lot, for putting this song out in the way he did. It's got a great claymation video. The video that was on MTV was pretty funny. Not everybody thought so. It's a song, if you look at it as just a song itself, it's not very redeeming. I'm giving it a non-knockdown simply because of all the trouble it caused Fogerty later on. And it actually led to a really important decision by the Supreme Court in 1994, which we don't really have time to go into, but this song was the catalyst for that. So if you go and do some research.
Wait, hold on. Give us a little breakdown. Just give us like the 20-second version.
Yeah. Go into it, man.
Oh, okay, I'll try to make this fast. So when this song came out and it made its way over to Saul Zaentz, and he heard the song Zaentz Can't Dance, which was an obvious reference to him, along with Mr. Greed, he sued John Fogerty for defamation. And then he sued John Fogerty because once he started to pay more attention to the album, he looked at the song The Old Man Down the Road and sued Fogerty because he claimed that the song was a ripoff of the old Creedence tune Run Through the Jungle.
Right.
So Fogerty created 2 lawsuits with this one album, and specifically this one song. So with regard to Zaentz Can't Dance, he had to immediately re-record it. He changed the Z to a V, and it was re-released as Vans Can't Dance. They changed the album art. They changed the song. He went into the studio, didn't re-record the whole song. He just said he sang the letter V, and they spliced it into the tune.
Oh, my God.
Pretty weird stuff. But the important Supreme Court case that I'm referring to is as a result of having to defend himself in the suit about the Old Man Down the Road sounding like Run Through the Jungle, Fogerty actually defended himself successfully in that lawsuit. But the problem is he was a defendant that won. And the way the copyright laws worked at the time is that if you were the defendant and you won, it was hard, if not impossible, to recover all of your attorney's fees. So Fogerty argued at the time stated at the time, that the royalties he made on The Old Man Down the Road were dwarfed by the amount of legal fees he had to pay to defend himself. But this is a real issue for the entire recording industry at this point, because if any artist leaves a label and they go to another label and they continue to record, and then the old label sues them for sounding like themselves, what they can do is basically use their financial might to crush artists who don't have the money to defend themselves. But Fogerty stood up. He defended himself. He first argued that the lawsuit was brought in bad faith. The Ninth Circuit Court ruled that he did not prove that. So he appealed to the Supreme Court of the United States. And in 1994, in a very important ruling, they ruled that Fogerty did not have to prove that the lawsuit was brought in bad faith in order to recover his attorney's fees. So they awarded him then the attorney's fees for having to defend himself against his former employer, which is pretty important. I think everybody who was a recording artist back in that day was probably sitting, waiting and hoping that Fogerty would succeed in that lawsuit, and he did.
Wow.
So it meant a lot for the recording industry.
Yeah, no, that is a monumental decision. Mike, go ahead and do your last round.
It's hard for me to decide which one of these 2 songs I like better, the acoustic or the electric version. I think I'm leaning towards the acoustic, but just barely. The guitar work in the electric version, I think, is way ahead of its time, and that's in my notes where that first appears, that this work is a decade ahead of its time. I would love to hear this album being remastered. I think the mix is a bit off at times throughout. This is a classic song full of classic lyrics. Then we go over to Vans Can't Dance. This song sounds like the illegitimate child of Billy Ocean and Creedence Clearwater Revival. It doesn't work. It's got the vocal chops from Creedence Clearwater Revival and the musical background of Caribbean Queen. I think that real drums, guitar, and actual brass section would have saved this song from taking a knee. But alas, no, we just kept going down the road, and this was just 80s electronics at its worst, and I scored it a knockdown. Neil Young 10, John Fogerty 8.
All right. Well, we have us a fight. That's a good job, fellas. Let's see what happened. First, let's get Richard's post-fight. Richard?
I think I let the decisions of the last couple of weeks cloud my head a bit because the numbers flat out predicted what was essentially a 7-2 victory for Neil Young. They had Young winning 8 of the 13 categories, with Fogerty only taking 3, with 2 ties. That matches very nicely with the 7-2 win that we got this week. It was the human factor, me, that got in the way of the numbers this week. Score 1 for math, boys and girls. I overthought this one. Back to you guys.
Yeah, obviously John Fogerty gets crushed in the head a whole bunch, and he'll be on medical suspension indefinitely. He may not be back in the ring for a long time. Let's look at the scorecard, guys. So Scott had a pretty substantial difference. He had 86 to 83 with his 2 knockdowns. Basically, this is well, really, for him, John Fogerty only won 3 rounds. Tony similarly had a absolute domination by Neil Young, and that was he only gave John Fogerty 1 round for a center field. So there's that. And then Mike also had, like Scott had Neil Young winning 7 of the 9 rounds. So it's a pretty significant difference in the level of competition. One thing I've noticed, guys, is like when we had U2 versus Simon and Garfunkel on their breakup album. Breakup albums are hard. Sometimes it works. Alanis Morissette pulled it off. Fleetwood Mac was pulling it off with Rumors. But John Fogerty doesn't get it here. What are your guys' thoughts? What didn't work, Tony?
I thought that he started to do too many things. Like the first 4 songs were decent and I enjoyed them. Like I enjoyed Old Man Down the Road. I enjoyed Rock and Roll Girls. But when he started going a little more, he started trying to change his sound. And as a listener who's used to what John Fogerty is supposed to sound like, I sat there going, "You're not supposed to sound like this, John," and I don't like it.
Yeah.
Combine that with how just dominating Neil Young was, and just he puts out just song after song after song, and it's just a winner after winner after winner, and then you have this result.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. Mike, what are your thoughts post-fight?
I gotta wonder if we all just jumped in a time machine and got out a cassette recorder in the mid-'80s and just sat down in a room and did the same album fight, if we would have been kinder to John Fogerty or not. I think the weakness in this album really is the electronics, the electronic drums, the synthesizers. He would have had such a better album now with 30 years of time between recording and today, if he had gone and gotten some session musicians, a real brass section when he wanted to do that in the song, a real drummer throughout, just really taking the weakness and replacing it with strength, would have delivered a much more of a timeless album versus just kind of a classic with some really good songs. But you go up against Neil Young's album and just track for track, Neil was better with a couple of exceptions.
Scott, any final thoughts on this fight?
Well, one of the things about these 2 artists that I find fascinating is that they are incredibly stubborn, and they don't necessarily do what you want them to do as a fan. They release stuff that you scratch your head and go, man, as great as this guy is, why the hell is he doing this?
Good point.
I mean, certainly John Fogerty had proven that he was a man of epic talent composing songs, the one specifically that he created in Creedence Clearwater Revival. And Neil Young also has a great songbook. But one of the interesting things, and one of the reasons I pulled this album fight together to suggest it, was that both of these artists were sued in the 1980s, but they were sued for opposite reasons. As we talked about, Fogerty was sued for sounding too much like himself. Neil Young was actually sued by his label for not sounding like himself. He had signed a deal with Geffen Records, and hilarious. The first album he put out was an electronic album, and the owner of Geffen, David Geffen, freaked out. He said, "Dude, what are you doing? I need a rock and roll album," because that's what he thought Neil Young should do. He thought maybe, Rest Never Sleeps Part 2 or something should be the next release on Geffen Records. That's why he signed him to this deal. Well, Neil Young, in response to that, puts out an album called Everybody's Rockin' by Neil and the Shocking Pinks. And it was basically a rockabilly album from the 50s, and it pissed him off even more, so he sued him. So here are two guys that got sued by their labels for opposite reasons. And I find that kind of fascinating. It's sort of a side note on this fight.
Mike, will you do the disclaimer for us?
Of course. We do album fights because we love music. We pick these albums because they are favorites, they're classics, they're music that we love. When we go in and do the album fight, we have to pick nits. We have to find a winner, which means finding flaws. That in no way should be taken as a criticism of the artist or the album because, hey, they're only here because they're great in the first place. We really hope that when you listen to Album Fight, you discover something new about music. Give these albums a spin, give these artists a listen, and enjoy our bantering.
Perfect. Fellas, it's a Sunday. You guys got up early to do this with me on St. Patrick's Day, so green or not, I'm pinching all of your faces.
Thank you.
I appreciate you guys, and I love to hang out with friends and do these. Thank you so much for doing this. Let's all do another one.
Sounds good, Pete.
I like it.